Have you ever wondered how many hats there were throughout history or what the most popular types of hats were? Hats were originally developed for a protection purpose seen in the first hat, which was a straw hat, in ancient Egypt in Thebes' tomb in 3200 BC. That was over 30,000 years ago, and hats were based off of protection or fashion, which is now seen today. Hats are now used for many different purposes, such as religious headdresses, ski masks for disguise, or even things such as surgical caps in the medical field. Since hats are considered a spin-off of the term headgear, things also such as helmets or even hoodies are used as a considerable hat. These hats, such as the straw hat that was first used, were made out of big materials such as large leaves or even felt, which were the creations of the first hats because these had the thickest materials that could be used for these crazy protection purposes. If you go on to masterclass.com to an article called Types of Hats, a brief history of hats, there's many different sections of history shown on that website about what the reasons hats came about in those different classes of society. One being the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire started off hats as the Phrygian cap, which was made and created by the enslaved of the Greek and the Romans. They used this cap in the American Revolution and the French Revolution as a sign of freedom, which is a big reason we don't use caps today. Caps are more of a fashion purpose and even protection purposes like it was before. But this sign of freedom was really shown well in the women of history of hats. Women weren't allowed to wear caps from the 1800s. However, they were slowly brought into caps throughout movie characters and were seen wearing many different hats by many different strong women. And now women are able to wear whatever caps that they would prefer. If you go on to History of Hats on historyofhats.net, or even high fashion hats through history, you can see all of the first types of hats that were able to be worn and to be shown off. The first hat that was able to be seen was the Balor Hat. The Balor Hat was created in 1849 made purposely for the British soldiers. This hat was to show off social status and to show their military rank. However, this hat was slowly able to be used by all of the economic classes. This hat was so popular that it lasted from 1849 until the 1960s. This hat was made out of a hard felt material that I spoke of before and was the foundation of many different hats that we will be seeing coming up. The next hat that started off really as a protection purpose was the Stetson Hat. This hat was created by a man named John B. Stetson, and this hat conquered the West. We now see this hat as a hat called the Cowboy Hat. However, this was used for protection of the head and the neck and started off the protective purpose of these hats. This hat was also a waterproof material, which was not as a priority for the West as it does not rain as much. However, this hat is used all across the world today, and that is a great purpose of this hat. The hat that was also from the Stetson hat is the Sombrero. However, this hat originated in Mexico and is a large part of Spanish culture. This hat was created from the word sombra, which means shadow, as it covers the head, neck, shoulders, and chest regions. So it was able to be a large protective shield from the sun and is, again, another strong foundation of hats throughout history. The next hat that really brought in women in the history of hats was the fedora. The fedora was seen in movies, and the first movie character was a lady named Princess Fedora Romanov. She wore this hat, and the hat was soon named after her, and really brought in that women were able to be equal and to be able to wear these hats, or any hat. This hat was also a felt material and was based off of the Balor Hat. This hat also came in the 1800s in 1882 which was about 40 years after the Balor Hat was created. The next hat was made out of a material that has not been spoken of yet. This is the steel hard hat. This hat is still a hat represented in construction and contracting today. However, it's made out of more of a high-density polyethylene and has more suspension to lessen the injuries, which is what this hat was made for. This hat was made for the protection purposes of individuals and was patented in 1919 by a man named E.W. Bullard. This hat was the first hat that actually had a patent attached to the branding of the hat. The next hat is the top hat, which was created from the Balor Hat and from the Fedora, being made out of a silk wool material instead of that hard felt material. But it also could be made from felt materials and synthetic materials. This hat was another sign of the large women in history of hats, as a lady named Marlene Dietrich would wear this hat and the coat with the tailcoat, to show off that women were able to wear this exact hat throughout history and to show that they, again, were starting to be equal and wanted their name put out there in the 19th century. Because this hat was made for fashion, formal attire purposes, for specific ranks, and she showed that it was not just for those reasons. The final hat that is the most popular hats throughout the beginning of history and even today is the rice hat. This hat is a very similar hat to the sombrero. However, this hat has a cooling effect with the watertight seal from the grass-like material that this is made from, called sedge. So this hat was able to create that watertight seal, which created a cooling effect whenever it was wet, and was also able to shield the majority of the chest, shoulder, neck, and head regions in the fields. Since there's so many different types of hats throughout history and hats are still ever changing, you want to go out and be a part of the history of hats. Your name could be like Marlene Dietrich or Princess Fedora Romanoff and show off the interest of hats. Wear a baseball cap. Go out to the Kentucky Derby. Wear your fancy hats.